Hi, my name is Song. I came to the MA program of web design in 2017, and now I'm about to graduate. First of all, I research all these companies, and also I need to think about what I'm more interested in terms of the positions. Do I want to do more of the UX design, product design, or visual design? So I found a couple of them that I'm more interested in. And also, I need to consider how can I prepare which project I want to show them more, because they will have a different focus.
The quality of the portfolios here are always top-notch, very refined. You can tell that these students are getting guidance during the prep phase, and this is probably the third, fourth, fifth iteration of this portfolio. In a world that's so saturated with talent, you really need to stand out, stick out. And the best way to do that is by having a very polished portfolio, a very clear communication style, and just be prepared to answer tough questions.
So some of the classes really helped me to prepare my portfolio, and one of them is typography by DC, and the other one is visual strategy by Z.
The typography class he was talking about is kind of a second semester class for master's candidates, and it kind of introduces a lot of them to their first taste of type. Not just thinking about them as the fonts you choose that are already in the menu, but thinking about type as a structural expression that's as important as any other structural expression in any given design. So there's the structural aspect of type, but then there's also the cultural aspect of type. Without knowing the context of where a particular typeface falls in history, it's hard to use it sort of properly, which is why Song kind of jumped in with both feet, because I think he has a great sense of where things fit culturally. So it worked out beautifully for him.
I'm super excited for meeting Airbnb today because I'm a very loyal user for their product, and also just the idea of participating in their design community is very intriguing for me, and that's one of the big motivations for me in this program.
I'm actually coming with zero expectations and just here to listen, and then kind of share my feedback of maybe things that are working, things that aren't working, and just like with Song, maybe stuff he didn't consider yet. Hi Song, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
How are you?
Very good, how are you?
I'm doing really well, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
You're going to show me some work today?
Yeah, so today
Great.
I'm going to show you a case study that I did for a design assistant for earthquake.
Oh, cool.
So this is a design project that I did in my visual development class. So the base of this project was that we're going to design for the subject of earthquake, and we can do anything about it. But everybody was assigned with a different target group, and this is the target group that I was chosen. So it's age 70 to 85 years old, little education, along urban and low income. So when I got it, I realized, oh, this is so much different than anything I've ever done before, because it's a very extreme target group.
And an often forgotten target group, very marginalized.
Yeah. So I realized that they're like the opposite of the tech-savvy user group.
Totally.
And I want to focus on the different demographic. So when I started looking at the demographic of San Francisco senior residents, I realized almost 1/3 of them are low income. A lot of them live in single-room occupancy hotels, and almost 1/3 of them live alone. That just immediately led me to Chinatown. I want to deeper into this community to see what can I do for them to better react to earthquake. And what I found is that there's some problem that not many people have touched on before. It's about after the earthquake. Because when earthquake happens, a lot of time these like telephone signals will be cut off. It will be very hard for people to call with their own phone. So this picture was Japan in 2011. After that, only several public phone booths was working. So people will line up for hours just for making available phone to contact with their family. But compared to the traditional making a phone call, a text message or an email is easier to process through the signal because it takes a lot less data. That's why Facebook launched the mark safe function
Yeah.
to react to natural disasters or like terrorist attack. So just hit a button and all their friends within the network will get to know their status. It's very instant. But the problem is not many senior people use cell phones or even smartphones. For household income less than $30,000 a year, only 27% of them use a smartphone.
Wow.
So clearly, this function, like from Facebook Mark Safe, is a privilege for a lot of the senior people. So my goal is to how can I create something for Mary, 76 years old, who doesn't have a smartphone but can also have the privilege to contact with her family with a very intuitive way. So this is my persona. She's like a typical senior resident in Chinatown, San Francisco. She has limited English level, live alone, and the way that she connects with her family is use stationary phone at her home. And they're the non-tech users. So from the ideation process, I was thinking, what if I can create a system that allows them to register with their own identity so everybody will have an ID number. And then when earthquake happens, when they go to any of the shelter area, they can scan their ID. And in this way, from the database that the family that was registered with their phone number will be accessed through this system. So once they scan their ID, this system itself will send text message to all the family members registered in this system. So the senior people, they don't actually need to do anything. They don't need to dial any number. They don't need to do any of the interaction. They just need to scan their ID.
What about folks that don't have IDs?
So the ID is a takeout from the kiosk system that's going to be displayed in Chinatown.
Got it.
So they'll go there and they finish the registration and get the ID. I'm going to give them a prize to encourage them to do this.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I started with this when comparing with the old way that people need to find a phone booth, wait in line, and dial one family, and the other one has to pick up to make the connection, and then after that they need to dial again for another one. The new way is that they can go after the earthquake, they can go to any of the shelter, they scan their ID, and then for all the family contact that's being stored in this system, the system itself will send text message for them. So I'm planning to have this kiosk system displayed in public area like Portsmouth Square in Chinatown because that's most of the traffic is. And also I noticed a lot of people carry this shopping bag around. So I'm planning to give them the shopping bag at the price at the end of the registration. So they can carry around and also bring awareness within the community with the branding of this project on it. So the user flow is they start at the kiosk, they take a picture with that, and then they input their family's phone number, and then they're done with the registration. They're going to receive an ID card and the prize, and they're going to keep the ID card. And then after the earthquake, they're going to evacuate, and then they can go to any of the shelter area. They're either going to be self-scanning at the kiosk, or they can be scanned by volunteers.
Got it.
And then system detect them and then send the status text. And I did some sketches and wireframe to see how this kiosk could look like for people about 70 years old to clearly understand how to use it.
Yeah.
So I did this, and I took it for the first user testing, and it's very interesting how they saw this, and I found out a good way for them to understand what it is to tell them as using it as an ATM machine, because a lot of them know how to use ATM. They know how to put in the password, and then they know how to get cash out of it. So that's the output from this kiosk. So that's my inspiration that I need to design this system as intuitive as ATM machine. And also for the ID card, what form of the ID card? Initially, I was thinking something as a wristband or a bracelet, but they don't really like it. They wanted something smaller than that, and I realized they carry key all the time. That's something they always bring. So I'm just gonna print the ID card on a keychain card. And for the second round of user testing, I was showing them this interface on an iPad to see how much level they can understand about this signing up process. And what's interesting is that some of these visual elements that I had earlier, such as a backspace, we are very familiar with this, but a lot of senior people, they don't understand what it means. So for a lot of this design, I need to be just clearly, literally type it out with both Chinese and English. So whoever they are, they can both get information of the function of the interaction. And then I revise my wireframe. And here is the text that I designed. The first one is when they finish the sign up registration, their family member will get a text saying your family member connected with you on this system. And then after the earthquake, once they scan their ID card, they're going to receive a photo and also who was marked safe and then which location that she scanned, because that the scan at the shelter has a location. So they will get this information immediately. And then for the branding, I started with the title of Golden Prep, as Golden for senior people and the Prep is for preparation. And then from G and P, I evolved from having a link, like connection together, because this project is about connection. And also I found inspiration from this traditional Chinese pattern, so I combined them together. And for the color palette, I got inspiration from some of the fashion trend, architectures.
Smart.
And senior people love bright colors. That's a really
That's a nice palette.
Yeah, to attract them. And then this is the final branding I did. So I also did this visual instruction for guiding them what to do before the earthquake and then what to do after the earthquake in the two-tone color system. And here is a mock-up for the interaction of the kiosk. So it has a camera. They're going to take a picture from it. So starting from here, they take a picture. And then here is a keypad they can use for putting their family contact number. And then after they're done, they're going to show them there's a prize. And here is a prize, a shopping bag they're going to receive. For lower income people in Chinatown, even a small gift that's going to encourage a lot of their motivation for finishing the registration.
Yeah, you're incentivizing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also I'm planning to send out postcard for a neighborhood that has a lot of like senior residents.
Yeah,
and
outreach.
also this is for approaching their children to let them know there is a program like this, so whenever they are visiting their parents on the weekend, they can go with them together to finish the registration.
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah.
And then also public campaign to bring awareness. In the end, I would like to show you the detail of the interaction.
Sure. Great. Really great prezzo.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. What kind of questions do you have for me?
In terms of my execution for the interaction,
Yeah.
Do you think it makes sense based on your own experience
Yeah.
to designing product?
I think the interaction's good. I am more of a visual designer, so I can give you some. Remember, like last time.
Yeah.
I want you to keep in mind accessibility.
Okay.
These are folks that have specific accessibility needs. In particular, I think you can maybe do some type studies
Okay.
to make the type more legible, easier to read, larger for sure, especially on some of the sections. So like something like this is good.
Yeah.
Something like this becomes a little bit harder to read. Instructions like these might prove to be more difficult.
Okay.
So how do you make the product more accessible to the target demo? In this particular case, these are older folks that might have eyesight impairment.
Right.
They might be legally blind. So is there an audio component to this where potentially someone can speak or there's a voice talking them through the prompts?
Okay.
And then how do you, of course, localize that so that it's accessible to people with different languages?
Right.
So the visual flow is easy because we're talking about 6 steps, but I think you need to take one more pass in consideration at accessibility. Like how easy is it for people to see, hear, understand a lot of the things going on here. There's some other accessibility concerns like around contrast.
Okay.
So some folks, maybe they can see okay, but there isn't enough contrast in the actual, So definitely some things to take into consideration, right? So we just want to make sure, like, hold on, go back. Can we go back one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, go back to this UI here. So maybe we can increase the contrast here and the legibility here.
I see.
And maybe that's just an exploration in font weight
Okay.
or typesetting. Stuff like that's really good. As far as any other visual things, like it's pretty clean as is. You want, so this is like the contact. So one thing you want to take in consideration into this design is like edge cases, as far as like what the UI does when certain things happen. So let's say she has 15 contacts in here. How is that displayed here? Are these contacts just scrolling? Is it paginated? Do the boxes themselves shrink?
Initially, I designed it to have 3 slots.
Okay.
As the mandatory.
Sure.
They can also skip. They can also just type 1. I think for my further development, I need to consider how can I use the space if they have many contacts.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. That's super important.
Okay.
Let's see what else. Let me look at the UI flow here. Finished. This is good too. Yeah.
I designed this arrow, like having this animation, because this is where they receive the physical output from this kiosk.
Yeah. Definitely take into consideration also things like if this display is being viewed outside on a sunny day. Okay. Let's make sure like the contrast values of these colors like pop and there's enough contrast and difference between a lot of the shades. And again, that might just be like user testing, where you take like an iPad maybe out and just kind of test some different color and contrast and saturation things. Let's see. So one of the things, I think one of the largest challenges you might have is, that might help you, is identifying some barriers of entry. So like what would prevent some people from engaging in the actual product? Are they afraid of technology? Are they afraid of the government having their information, or some entity having their information, right? There's anonymity and privacy concerns.
So when I approach to them in public, they do have a fear of like the information from the government, because they're not really good at English. Yeah. And they're like
they're immigrants. My parents too. I mean, when they came to this country, there was a kind of baked in, not necessarily distrust or mistrust, but they're just being protective. There's a distance. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's definitely something to consider. Incentivizing with the bag is really smart. One of the things that I think you have a good profile as to the ideal candidate that should enter the system, but I think you should probably think more about who the actual target is. I think it's the family members. I think you really need to think about like the children of these folks. They're like, hey, we're going to go out for Sunday dinner or Sunday lunch. Let's stop by the park real quick and get you registered. You know, it'll take 5 minutes and you get a little key fob. It'll go on your key and they kind of go through the process for them. Right. So as far as like getting the information out, I think figuring out the right target audience, which I think is probably family members or friends. Also, the location of the kiosk I think is really important. I think it might be a little too passive to have it in a public space like a park. Like what if these were in hospitals, right? So maybe it's folks that, places where your demographic frequents more often. Like, yeah, they go to the park a lot too, but like if they go for like a checkup or they go to like CVS or Walgreens, you know how CVS and Walgreens has like the blood pressure cuffs?
Yes.
Kind of the same thing like that. Like that's a really good model of something that's like free and open to the public, it's easy to use. Like how could this be similar to that? In that they can sit down for a couple minutes and just put in all their user information and print them out a little card, or they get a card in the mail. But they're in a space that feels like a little bit, maybe a little bit more private, or feels more appropriate for the kiosk to belong. That could be a good thing too. The ATM inspiration and model I think is really smart. Think about other kind of public kiosks, like the blood pressure cuff is probably a really good example, that you can continue to model and refine not only the interaction, but also kind of the actual physical device, how it looks. How do you make it friendly, right? I think the ATM model is really good, but remember, these folks, they're a little older, they might need somewhere to sit. So maybe there's a little stool, and you know, to make them comfortable. Because remember, they're inputting a lot of information. That might be hard to stand in one place and give a bunch of information while you're standing. Right. There's fatigue at that age. So maybe it's a little seat that they can sit down and comfortably put in all the information. Maybe. The keychain is really smart because one thing they definitely have is keys to their apartment or their place, right? I think your icon design could use some simplification. And also take into consideration, so one of the things that you ran into that was interesting is like the backspace button, right? Not knowing that. So thinking about symbols that are universal and also culturally appropriate, especially if you're targeting a very specific group of folks. And this is a challenge that I think a lot of product teams have nowadays too. Airbnb is a really good example where we have this beautiful library of icons. But a lot of those symbols don't translate very well, you know, or they mean something, especially in China. So thinking about what kind of examples and what kind of visual patterns and designs and kind of visual references are culturally more appropriate is really important too. Another question that you can ask yourself is like, how does this scale? In terms of, it's a really great idea. So once you get past the initial problems, right? Cleaning up the design, making it more friendly, making it easy to use, targeting the right folks, eliminating all the barriers of entry. Like, do you foresee this actually being helpful in places that have hurricanes, for example, or tornadoes, where, you know, it's a massive problem, communication goes down, and there aren't payphones around. That was a really good example. So there's a lot of different kinds of natural disasters, terrorist attacks. You know, all these kind of things where these kiosks or a repository of this information is really helpful. The privacy concern is like one of the barriers of entry as well. So how do you maintain anonymity, and how do you promise that folks' identities won't be compromised, or it's not going to a government agency, or, you know, are you a non-for-profit? You know, the information won't ever be sold. So that's a whole thing. At Airbnb, one of our core technologies is actually how do you prove the person that you say you are is who you are, right? So verification of identity is really what builds trust. So you can kind of think about that in terms of how do you verify that these people that are entering their information are the actual people, but also how do you engage your users on a level of trust where this company, I'm giving them my information, do I trust them? You know, and I think a lot of that comes through the design, but there needs to be an extra step there, and I don't know what that is.
One thing I learned from the research is that in such a community like the senior people in Chinatown, they get a lot of information from their own peers.
Yes.
Like people around them who shop with grocery every day.
Yeah.
So that's why I designed a shopping bag.
Totally.
Because they're gonna pass around, and when they're carrying it on the street, people will notice that. And
that was
get
really
more
smart.
Information from it.
Yeah, and it's a really cute bag, and you're communicating, you're advertising like the service as well. It's really good.
I was considering what if this program can show some of the successful like stories from somebody from the community to let them have these empathy. They can understand that some people just like me and they can do this, and maybe I should try that too.
Yeah, and also engaging community leaders. It's like these are people, leaders in the community that are like, hey, this is a really great thing, especially for folks that are like by themselves and alone. You know, just trying to engage people at different levels as well. So the bag is one, you know, community outreach. I don't know how you would do that. But there's a lot of like models out there to follow. Speaking of outreach, I think the advertising has to be really targeted at people that care about these people. Friends and family, kids, like I mentioned before, people in the community, stuff like that. I think that's really important as far as engagement goes. Privacy we talked about. And yeah, just doing some explorations with the typeface I think would really kind of clean up and streamline a lot of the interaction. I think just go to a lot of these kiosks and see, like go to the movie theater and like purchase a ticket and like do some kind of research around like how many steps. I think one thing that's really working really well is that there's only 6 steps here as far as like verifying their ID and going through and putting in information. Maybe you can think of a creative way to more quickly input the phone numbers. Voice recognition, maybe? Yeah. I don't know. Something where they could just kind of like churn through it a little quicker. Or like a lot of these folks have an address book. Right. Potentially some you know, visual recognition with the camera.
What if, you know, they can like scan it
and
it recognizes numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's just like, I mean, there's so much camera technology out there that can just parse information from like a photo as well. So like implementing that kind of technology as well, and there's a lot of open source options for that too. Those are really good options, and yeah, that's it. Overall, it's really great. The overall presentation is super clean. It's exciting. It's a really great product. Like, I hope like this happens, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really great. There's a lot of built-in infrastructure that supports stuff like this right now. So, for example, like Amber Alerts. So, like if a child goes missing, like we all get that text message. During the fires in Sonoma, one of the concerns was they were sending out text messages, but a lot of those systems weren't aligned, or like, you know, they didn't gain access to like whatever mechanism that is that sends out emergency alerts. So is this something where you can convince local leaders in the community to adopt that as kind of like an Amber Alert type system as well? Like during an emergency, everyone that's registered here will kind of like their family members will get a ping, be like, hey, like, you know, your person's okay, they checked in, stuff like that. Yeah. And also during an emergency, how many of these kiosks will be available?
So what I learned is that San Francisco reserve all the public schools and park, hospital, as an emergency shelter.
Great.
So they're going to decide depending on the damage and like also the sea level. They're going to open some of this, but once they're open, it's going to be a set location, and then we'll tell people to go there for the shelter. Yeah. So I'm thinking that to have these just a handheld scanner, and once people are deployed in there, they can set the scanner with the actual location. Sure. So whenever they scan it, the system will also know where they were scanned.
Yeah, I think that should just be an app. You don't even need a scanner.
Okay.
You can basically just design a native app that uses the API from the cameras
That's
and
true.
you can have volunteers go around with the camera. So now you have to design 2 pieces of software, 2 apps. So I think this is the first component. This is the intake. So then how does the actual check-in mechanism work? Because I think that's really smart. After a natural disaster, your primary concern is your own safety, right? And maybe food and water. Checking in might be a secondary thing.
Right.
But if you have people in the community that do have cell phones, or even folks that are engaged in this project, they can go around, download the app, and if they see somebody's keychains, or they can ask them, they're like, hey, can I scan it real quick just to let your family members know? Yeah.
That's a really great way.
Yeah, and you can kind of make it crowdsourced. I forgot the name of the app, but there's this app that this guy developed for people with visual impairments, where you can volunteer and download the app, and you're in a registry. And whenever someone who is legally blind has a problem reading a can of food or something like that, they go on the app, it automatically contacts one of the volunteers, and you're connected right away. So they use their camera and be like, hey, what does this can say?
Oh, wow.
I think it's called Help Me See or something like that.
That's
We can
amazing.
research after this, but so maybe it could be something like that where you can get volunteers to engage and help this marginalized community. Be like, hey, just like sign up with the app, and whenever there's a natural disaster, like these people, these volunteers go into the community and check on folks because maybe their family can't. So think about the kind of like all of the people that may be able to
That's really
contribute to the
great.
program.
That's
Yeah.
really great.
Yeah.
Something I learned from the research is that during earthquake,
Be My Eyes. That's the app.
a lot of people found their families through their family members, like neighbors
Yes.
or friends.
Totally.
So it's like the information is not direct,
Yep.
but it has to go through a network
Absolutely.
to be passed on.
Yeah. So how do you build that network, right? Maybe by registering into this network, you also get a tote bag, just by signing up with the app with your information,
Right.
and like you kind of become responsible for your friends and neighbors too. Like, oh, there's a woman down the hallway from me. She doesn't have any family. She's all alone, but she's really sweet, and I'm friends with her. So maybe that person is now kind of like responsible for checking her in after a natural disaster.
I see.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, overall, really great. I hope you see this through. Like, you should get funding for something like this from a non-for-profit or something.
Yeah, I see this more likely to be done by a nonprofit or
Yeah.
maybe sponsored by a bigger company.
Yeah,
And then
email Bill Gates or something. Yeah, it's really good. Very exciting stuff. And good presentation, really strong visual design. I think just continue to refine the visual design and simplify. So just think of like simplicity and accessibility. Those are the 2 components that I think you can synthesize into the current designs that'll really kind of like push it to the next place.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
All right. Thank
Awesome.
you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank
My
you for your
pleasure.
input.
Yeah. Great.
I think the review today went really well. Jason is actually really nice and very patient for me to go through all the steps in my design. And he gave me something very interesting that is like a different perspective from what I learned in the school and also from doing user research.
The Song's portfolio was very strong, well organized. He communicated effectively and told a story throughout the presentation, which I think was really important. And it showed that he was prepared. He thinks about scale and impact at a global and personal level. So at Airbnb, our motto is belong anywhere. And his designs are incredibly inclusive, which is really important. My impressions of Song were that he is incredibly bright, hardworking, creative, high attention to detail, very empathetic, and overall, I hope the very best for him.